We begin now the Gemara on the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Yudalid, top of Amud Beis. Amar Reish Lakish. Also Meris. We now have to analyze the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Metabel b'chazeres hashmagil leparperes hapas. In other words, he doesn't have anything for Tibul Rishon. The only vegetable that he has access to is chazeres. And in effect, he's going to do two tibulim on chazeres. He's going to do tibul rishon right after the drinking of the first cup. And then after the matzah, they're going to bring him out the chazeres a second time for a second tibul. Says Reish Lakish, we can only understand this Mishnah and analyze the underlying logic of the Mishnah if we hold of the principle of mitzvot strichas kavana, that you can only be yotze a mitzvah if you had kavana for the mitzvah. Meaning that how could he make a bracha on the second tibul of chazeres when he already was makayim the mitzvah? The answer is mitzvah strichas kavana, that when he dips the chazeres on the first round, even though it's mini mara, and he could have been yotze of mara, but he has kavana because it's not ready for mara. We have to wait till after the matzah for mara. So he has kavana not to be yotze. He's only doing an act of shinui to arouse the curiosity of the children, but he's not fulfilling the mitzvah of mara. And why? Since he's not eating it at the time of the chiyuv, he's eating the chazeres, this mara, as part of tibul rishon, and it's not a chiyuv, a shas chiyuv of achilas mara, because mara, the ikar chiyuv of mara is after the matzah, al matzot umram yochlu, in that sequence. Ubebori pri adama hu diachale. He makes a bracha of bore pri adama, like anytime he eats any yerek, he's not going to make the bracha al achilas mara. And why isn't he going to make the bracha on achilas mara? Because mitzvah srichas kavana, and he will not have kavana to be yotze with this tibul rishon of chazeres. Oh, if that be the case, then let's raise the following suspicion. Vidilma lo ichavin lemara. Maybe he didn't have kavana with this achila for the kiyum of the mitzvah of mara, and he wasn't yotze yedei chovasa. He only made a bar pri adama. Hilkoch boilim nehedrat letabule. The Mishnah says he's chayav to again do a second tibul of chazeres after he ate the matzah l'shem mara, for the sake of the mitzvah mara. Now, the only problem with the Gemara so far, right? Shlokish is beautiful, is the word dilma. What does he mean by dilma lo ichavein lemar? Maybe he didn't have kavanah to mar. Adarabah, this is exactly what we're going to instruct him. Do not have kavanah for the sake of mar. The word dilma usually means we're afraid of. But here, Adarabah, the contrary is correct. We're going to encourage him not to have kavanah. And the Rashbam says the following. He says that what comes first? The lashon of dilma lo chavi lemar means that we're afraid he won't have kavanah for the mara, and because of that chashash, the Rabbanim is saking that he should not have kavanah to have mara. Tosas, on the other hand, Dibra Maschel Zos, which is this very long Tosas here on the top of the Amud, they write that the lashon of the Gemara dilma lo chavi lemar is not bedafku. We shouldn't take it literally. The kavanah is bivadai lo yiskavi mosa sholakir matzah, because it's not the ikar's man of chiv mara. I meant to say. So therefore, for sure, he's not going to have kavanah to be yotze the mitzvah of mara. Isakadaitoch, and now Reish Lakish argues against his phantom adversary. If you're going to tell me mitzvah lo boy kavana, and there is such a man that says mitzvah don't need kavana, lama le trei tibule. Why does he have to add the second tibul? Hatava lechad zimna, with the first tibul, he was yotze the mitzvah of mara because he ate mara. And if you're saying mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana, then the ma'isa achila is itself the mitzvah and there's no contingency of kavana. So why should he be tovel again a second time after the matzah, as the Mishnah requires? And now the Gemara is going to argue against Reish Lakish. And the Gemara says the following: I can understand this Mishnah even if mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana. And you're asking trade tibuli lovely. Why do I need a second tibul? This is what's going to stimulate the curiosity of the children. You're asking, why does he need a second tibul? He was yotzi already the mitzvah mara in the first tibul. So the answer is, even though he was yotzi the mitzvah mara, we want him to be tovel a second time with chazeres. So there'll be an extra heker here that something strange is going on. And the tinokos are going to ask, well, this night is different than all other nights. We never had a second tibul. And that's going to lead them to ask the question, Manishtana. Again, the problem is going to be, according to this logic, when would the bracha of Borei of Shekchon Mitzvos Tzimono Al Achil's Mara be recited? Because now we're holding that Mrs. Ein Tzrichas Kavon, and he can be Yotze in any event with the first Achila, because of the dry and cut mechanical Maisa Achilas Mara, and he's eating Chazeres, he's eating Mara. No, so he should be making a bracha on that. And that's a question. Now, it could be very interesting that the second tibul, according to this line of reasoning, is really Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. In other words, there's a separate mix of Achilas Mara. Torah says, Al Matzah Mara Yachlu, and that he's going to fulfill with the first tibul. But that's not within the framework of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. The second tibul is what's going to engender Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim when the children ask the question, why are you doing a second tibul? And he says the following. He says that until this point in the Gemara had assumed that after the first tibul, right after the Kos Rishon, was the tibul of Shinui, because it was Kodem Asuda. And that was the heker that would stimulate the curiosity of the children. Now the Gemara is saying that mitzvahs ein tzrichas kavana. So then, with the first tibul, he's being yotze the mitzvah of Mara, because mitzvahs ein tzrichas kavana. Then it's not a heker over here. He's doing it for the same mitzvah. It's here for the purpose of kiyuma mitzvah. Says the Meiri l'dei zu ha-heker al-yidei ribui ha-tibulim. It's sort of like we take into account both tibulim, integrate them into one whole, and that creates a heker. And it's all shalo b'soch ikar asuda, because even after the matzah, he hasn't really started his suda. What's happens? You're bringing out your rokos and you're dipping them in. What's that all about? V'gam tibul hashenu miyad liachar achilas hamatzah kodem ikar asuda. He hasn't yet begun to partake in his suda, and therefore there's a bit of heker in both tibulim. The first tibul is very radical because he hasn't even eaten a thing yet. He just made kiddush. And the second tibul, he only ate the matzah. He hasn't started his ikar suda. So it could be that the heker is in both the tibul rishon and in the tibul sheni. And then the Meiri says that the ikar heker is with tibul rishon, which we would say that undermines the element of shinui. Unbelievable. The Meiri is saying that even at this point in the Gemara, the ikar mitzvah of morar is with the morar that he eats with tibul sheni after the matzah. And the tibul rishon therefore is heker. But even though the tibul rishon is heker, he was yotzi already the mitzvah of mara. This is wild. He was yotzi the mitzvah mara with his first tibul, even though it's a heker. And nevertheless, the second tibul is for the sake of mara after matzah. It's a new din. that although he was Yotzi his mitzvah Achilas Maror, because mitzvah ain't Tzrichas Kavan on the first round, but nevertheless he needs another Achilas Maror after the matzah. And according to the Miri, that second Achilas Maror after the matzah is so significant that we're going to make a bracha on the second Achilas Maror, even though he was Yotzi already his kiyum, V'kayim his mitzvah Maror with the first chazan. But the Gemara says, V'chi tema, now the Gemara wants to defend Reish Lakish. And he's going to say that for sure, mitzvahs Tzrichas Kavana. He says, if you're telling me that the tam here is only B'shum Heker Atinokas and Kain Lishma'ina and B'shar Yerokos, the Tana of our Mishnah should have said, B'shar Yerokos, which are not suitable for the mitzvah of Morah, that he needs a Tibul Sheni B'chazeres, and this is going to create a Heker for the Tinokos. So why did the Mishnah come up with this very strange, specific scenario where he has no other Yerokos other than Chazeres? Unless he wants to teach us that mitzvahs ain't, that mitzvahs Tzrichas Kavana, that even though he's eating Morah on the first table, he's not Yotzi the mitzvah. But according to you, that what we have here is a situation of mitzvahs ain't Tzrichas Kavana, and in effect he was Yotze with the first tibul, and the second tibul is M'shem Heker. So if you want to teach me the law that you need a second tibul M'shem Heker, you should teach me that law with regard to Yerokos, that you must eat a Yerek, whatever Yerek it is, whatever species, and be Mekayim, the mitzvah of Heker, Kadesha Yishlu Atinokos. So the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says that if the Tana would have told me the halach of Tibul Rishon, B'shar Yerokos, I would make the following mistake. That Hecha de Ika Shar Yerokos who divine trait Tibule. Why do I need two Tibulim in order to create a Heker Tinokus? Because I have two different types of Yerokos. Aval Chazeres Lechuda. But if he only has Chazeres, that's all he has access to, it's Lo Boy Trait Tibulim. We don't require two Tibulim in such a case, because that's not going to be a good situation. You could have a kilkul over here. Because if mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana, then with the tibul rishon of chazeres, he was yotzi already his mitzvah of achilas morah, even before the ikar zmani surah. And it's not that we're eating the morah because of a hekel tinokos. And in effect, what we're doing is we're being makdim the morah before it's ikar zmana. And therefore, we should do away with the entire enterprise of Tibul Kodem Asuda. Because if he only has Chazeres, and he's going to be Yotze with that Chazeres, the mitzvah of Morah, so then this is not a Hekel Litinokus, this is for the mitzvah of Morah. So you know what? It would be a better idea in such a case to drop the ball on the first tibul, leave it out, instead of being mocked in the mitzvah of Morah before the mitzvah of matzah, which we don't want to do because the Torah has that sequence that matzah comes first and Morah second, then he shouldn't be tovel at all before this. Drop it. Because again, if you're going to have tevilah before the Suda, then in effect you're undermining the heker because it's now l'kiyum mitzvah, because mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana. And if that be the case, you've more or less forfeited the entire enterprise of matzah first and morah second. We don't want to forfeit that kiyum. So therefore, logically, we would have said, if the Mishnah hadn't mentioned that he only has chazeres, rather if he has all Yerokos, we would have thought that in the Chai Gavna that he only has chazeres, you know what he should do? Forget about Tibul Rishon, drop it. Because it's EF Shalakaima. Because mitzvah saying tzrichas kavana, when he eats the chazeres before the Suda, he ipso facto fulfilled his mitzvah of Morah. So the better idea, therefore, we would think, is to just simply drop the ball and omit the first tibul, and do your second tibul as your first tibul and your only tibul b'chazeres after the achilas matzah. Kamash malon. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches me a gavaldige chiddush Dafilu chazeres, even if he only has in his possession chazeres, being in trade tibule. We require two tibul, gave it to lechi be'akera l'tinokos. That the very fact that he's doing two tibulim, again, the first tibul is the tibul of Mara for the mitzvah of Mara, and this is ain't tzrichas kavana, but then another tibul, why two tibulim? As we said before, the name of the Rosh, that we see this as an amalgamation, a sum total of two tibulim, and that's going to bring the heker and arouse the curiosity of the children. Now the Gemara asks a kasha on Reish Lakish. The Ode, Tanya, we have a brisa as far as the chiyuv of achilas maror is concerned, that even when he eats yerakos of maror, if they are tevel, in other words, he didn't get a chance yet to be maser, to be mafresh maser, then lo yotza yedei chovos. But achol and tmai, but if it's only tmai, meaning he bought these yerakos from an amor, it's a suffix whether he was maser or not. Chacham say, even though rov amioretz maser yichayev to be mafresh maser misafek, and he has tmai and he wasn't mafresh, is yotza. We have a brisa that says you could be yotze with maror, which is tmai. Why? Because since the chacham allowed tmai for aniyim, therefore, even though he's an ashir, we always say migu. He could be mafkes nechasim, and he would become an ani. So therefore, we, so to speak, neutralize the iser tmai, which is a chumah d'rabbanan. Benator again, it's becheskas musar because rov amioretz ma'asrin heim, and therefore it can be yotze the chiyuv of maror with tmai. Baita, the brisa goes on, achalon below miskaved, if he ate the maror without kavana, yotza. And Reish Lakish was the one who said mitzvah strichas kavana. Here it says achalon below miskaved yotza. And achon lechatzoin, so too the brisa continues. If he ate a chatzi shir and then he added another chatzi shir, we could be mitzaref the two in yotza. And shtei achilus mitzarefim l'shir kezayis. Ubevad shlo yisha ben achilach lechaverta yoser mikidei achilus pras. There shouldn't be a shehiyah, a separation between the first half of zayis and the second half of zayis of the time period they would take to eat a pras. And we see here that if he ate pachos mishir kezayis maror, he's not yotzi yedei chovos. But in any event, the brisa says that if he ate maror without kavanah, he's yotzi. We see clearly that mitzvahs einam tzrichas kavanah against Reish Lakish. So the Gemara answers to defend Reish Lakish tanoi. The issue of whether or not you ate something without kavanah, you yotzi or not, is in fact a debate amongst the tanoim. And in general, we hold mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah, but there is Rabbi Yossi Chita that mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah. The Sanya we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Yossi Omer, if a person has only one yerek in his possession, that is chazeres, is afal isha tibel the chazeres, even though he already ate the chazeres after the first kos of kiddush, and he dipped it into charoses, he did tibul. But nevertheless, mitzvah lahavi lefanav chazeres v'charoses ushnei tavshilim. So if a person ate chazeres b'tibul rich and he hasn't yet fulfilled his mitzvah, his chova of maror, because mitzvah strichas kavana, and in the first tibul he didn't have kavana l'shem mitzvah l'shem chova, he only had kavana l'shem shinui, and therefore there's a mitzvah to bring him a second round of chazeres. And that's the Shita Rabbi Yossi, based on the principle mitzvos strichas kavanah. Reish Lakish accepted Rabbi Yossi. So Gemara asks, "Vakati mimai." How do you prove that Rabbi Yossi holds that mitzvos strichas kavanah? I can always argue Dilma Kasava Rabbi Yossi mitzvos strichas kavanah. The reason why Rabbi Yossi tells us, instructs us to bring around a second tibul, a second charoses, is not because he wasn't yotze for the first. He was yotze zachilus maror with the first, because Rabbi Yossi holds mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah. The reason why we bring a second tibul, even though he was yotze his mitzvah maror with the first chazeres, is because we want to arouse the curiosity of the children. So the Gemara says, "Im kain, if you're telling me that the second tibul is nothing more than heker, My mitzvah. Look at the language of Rabbi Yotzi as quoted in the Bryce. It says mitzvah lahavi l'fanav chazeres. And the word mitzvah, l'chora, should mean that is a mitzvah of achilas mar. Now you're telling me mitzvah ein tzrichas kavani was Yotzi mar with the first evil. So how could it say in the Bryce, mitzvah lahavi l'fanav chazeres, the second chazeres? What's the mitzvah over here? You want to call it a kera, but don't call it a mitzvah. Therefore, we must assume, and this is the Gemara's final conclusion, that according to Rabbi Yossi, mitzvah tzrichas kavan, and therefore he didn't have kavan on the first tibul. He only did the first tibul l'shem hakera, and therefore he was not yotzi the mitzvah of mora with the first achila of chazeres. Therefore, he needs the second chazeres after the matzah for the mitzvah of achilas matzah. In any event, we see that this din of Reish Lakish is dependent upon a debate of Machlokas Tanoim, and Reish Lakish holds like Rabbi Yotzi that mitzvahs tzrichas kavan. Now we go on to the next part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says we bring out matzah charoses, azeres, and shnei tavshilin. My shnei tavshilin. Rav Huna, you know what shnei tavshilin is? It doesn't have to be basar. It doesn't have to be meat. It could even be silka v'yarosa. He could bring out cooked spinach or cooked rice. Now, again, this is because we are learning the Mishnah before the Gzeir of kidneys. Or didn't ever accept the Gzeir of kidneys. In any event, there's no need, says Rav Huna Dafka, to bring out two types of cooked meat. Rav Ami Mahader Asilka Varosa. No, he Dafka wanted these two vegetables for Shnei Tavshilin, the spinach and the rice. Only because Rav Huna mentioned these as two examples of Shnei Tavshilin. Therefore, it has I want to show that the halacha is like Rav Huna, and it's enough to have two Tavshilin of two different vegetables. If I'm going to take the vegetables that Rav Huna mentioned, and that's going to indicate that we accept Rav Huna. Now, I just wanted to point out over here that that I interpreted the word tered as spinach. It could be that in modern Hebrew, the word tered sometimes is used for spinach, but in the Gemara's language, tered is beets. So again, Rav Huna said you can be yotzei shnei tavshil with beets and rice, and Rav would search and seek out beets and rice, since this teaching issued from the mouth of Rav Huna. Although meat is certainly appropriate for the two dishes, Rava would use only beets and rice. He cherished the ruling of Rav Huna and wished to demonstrate that halacha accords with Rav Huna. Omar Rav Ashi Shmamina de Rav Huna. Let's derive from Rav Huna that lest the chayish lahad Rav Yochanan ben Nuri. Rav Yochanan ben Nuri was the one who prohibited rice on Pesach because he held that there were not 5 species of grains but 6, and even rice is subject to the law of chametz. Isanya Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer Orez min daganhu. It's another species of grains. V'chayoven al chimutzo kares while miyotzi b'dei chavaso the Pesach make matzah out of rice, and if the flour made out of rice would ferment and leaven, then you'd be chayiv for kares for eating chametz. So he wouldn't allow anyone to cook rice as one of the two tavshilin because it might become chametz. However, Rav Huna doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, for rather like the Rabbanon, that orez is not one of the species of grains and it cannot be chametz and it cannot be matzah, so there's no chash. Chizkiya Omar. What is shnei tavshilin? Says Chizkiya as afilu dagu beitza sha'olav. Even if you have one food that's made of 2 different foods, for example, you have fish and you cook the fish together with an egg, that itself is two cooked dishes. It's already considered shnei tavshilin, even though you eat it as one dish. Rav Yosef Amar, however, tzarech shnei mini bas. He insists that shnei tavshilin are shnei mini bas. So let's try to understand why Rav Yosef requires shnei bini bas. Gemara says echad, one of them should be roasted, zecher lePesach. The echad, one should be cooked, zecher lechagiga, which comes with the Pesach. Now, chagigas are basar. This is something that you may recall we had in the Mishnah Daf Samach Tes, and we understood there that according to the Tan of that Mishnah, chagiga is not a chova, but hakravasa hilak kidei sheyochlu es bisara lifnei achilas haPesach. That the reason why we eat the chagiga before the Pesach is kidei sheyeh Pesach mechal ala sov. However, Ben Tema on Daf Ayin in Pesachim says that mitzvahs hakravas chagiga arbasar yichova. It's a separate independent chiyuv, and he derives it from a pasuk, and there are special dinim that equate the chagiga with the korban pesach. Now, according to Rabbeinu Chananel, the Rif and the Rambam, and the Rashbam apparently, shnei tavshilin hem lidas Rabbi Yosef shnei minei basa. So that Rabbi Yosef's opinion is that shnei tavshilin mentioned and required in the Mishnah are two types of basa, and we need tzli for one of the two basar, keneged Pesach, and mevuchal on the other one, the other basar, keneged the chagiga. And Tosas says halacha kedas ben tema that chagigas are basar dina kepesach the einen echeles el tzli. So if the two tavshilin, one is keneged Pesach, one keneged chagiga, they both have to have. They also both have to be tzli if we go like Ben Tema. And our Mishnah later on is going to paskin that these two tavshilin should be tzli. The Rambam, on the other hand, doesn't paskin like Ben Tema, and therefore, according to him, you don't need tzli for the second tavshil. It could be a chagiga mivucheles. And there's a long discussion here about the Rambam. Ravina Omar. Ravina says, afilu garma ubishula. You don't even need two species of meat. You can have one piece of meat and it's gravy, and the gravy itself in which it was cooked, it's also considered a tavshil. So we have now four shitos with regard to shnei tavshil. According to Rafuna, even beets and rice. According to Chizkiah, even an egg and a fish and the egg that was cooked with the fish. According to Rav Yosef, you need two species of meat. And according to Ravina, even one species of meat together with its maraq, with its gravy. Pshita. The Gemara says the following with regard to Tibul Rishon of Chazeres is Hecha de Ikashar Yerokos. If he had access to other vegetables for the first Tibul, is Mevarech Ashar Yerokos Bori Pri Adama V'Achil V'Hoda Mevarech Al Chizmar V'Achil. So we understand very well that the bracha for the first yerek, let's say he has a potato or he has parsley, is Bori Pri Adama. Then he makes it Al Achilas Mara on the second tibul after the matzah. But Hecha de Leka Lachasa, if all he has is Chazeres for the two tibulim, what bracha should he make on the first tibul? Obviously, you should be making bar priyadama, but maybe you should make alachilas mara as well. And surely, if you hold mitzvahs ain tzrichas kavan, he was yotze already with the first tibul. Amar Avhuna mavarch meikara amara bari priyadama v'achil uvasof. When he gets to the second tibul, mevarch aleo alachilas mara v'achil. He should only recite the alachilas mara on the second tibul, and that's a pella. As we see on the top of Kuf Tes Vav, which will be tomorrow's daf, Mirza Shem Maskei Rav Chisda, Liachar Shamila Kreisei Menu Chozim Varach Alel. He's got to make an alachis mara on the first achil, the first chazeres that he ate, and how much more so if you hold mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah, he was yotze with the first tibul. So we're going to try to understand the shita of Rav Huna that on the first tibul he recites Bar Priyadama, and only on the second tibul does he recite alachilas mara. It's very strange. He ate the mara, and now he's going to eat a second mara, make the bracha after he was yotze. We have a mitzvah, we have a principle in brachos of mitzvos. Kol mitzvahs over mavarchalem over lasiyosan. You have to make the bracha before you do the mitzvah. Now you already fulfilled the mitzvah with the first tibul. Okay, then this is where we're going to stop. And in Mirza Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick it up here on the top of Kuf Tes Vav Amud Aleph with the kasha of Rav Chisda. Wishing you a great day.